Hi there, and welcome to the Open Notes podcast with the Fort Collins Symphony. I'm Jeremy, and today I'm joined with Dr. Erin Macdonald. Erin, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
I've got a real easy ball question just to get us started. What was the last movie that you watched?
Oh, the last movie that I watched, God, I've watched so many movies. Um, I went back through, I marathoned movies on the Super Bowl. I guess the last like sort of quote popular movie that I watched was Don't Look Up. Um,
Oh, okay.
on Netflix. Delightful. I had so many people texting me that Jennifer Lawrence reminded them of me as sort of heavily makeup, slightly gothic, astrophysicist with a chip on her shoulder. I
Oh,
think
that's
I'm,
awesome. I
yeah.
love that.
At the very least, the styling was. Yeah, it was. I don't think I was in the right headspace for it because it really depressed me, but it was a great movie. I really
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
that's what I've heard. We
Yeah.
haven't seen it, but I've heard very good things.
Yeah, it's really, really good. Yeah, I mean, I've also watched Spencer. I also marathoned the whole Hawkeye series and just kind of going through the last few days. But yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Awesome. And so you're an astrophysicist, science fiction consultant. I think there's a third thing that usually gets listed. What's your full title? How do you describe yourself when somebody asks you what you do?
Oh, it's so right now it's a little easier. I'm a writer, producer, and a science consultant. But
Okay.
when people ask kind of what have you done, I like to joke that I'm like a one-woman career panel for what you can do with an astrophysics PhD.
Yeah.
I've done it all
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, yeah, like you said, I've done research. I was an aerospace engineer. I was a teacher. I was a public educator, and then yeah, I got into the entertainment industry.
hmm hmm And so could you walk us through a little bit where you started and when you started working in the entertainment industry? What was it that turned you to more like popular consulting
Yeah.
and doing the things that like you're doing with us in March?
Yeah, I kind of brute forced it. I always wanted to work in film and entertainment. That was just a huge passion of mine
Why
growing
why
up.
why?
I loved it. I loved storytelling. I mean, I joked like I watch a ton of movies, but I watch, it took me until probably my late 20s, if not into my 30s, to realize like when people come over to hang out at your house, they don't want to sit and watch movies with you. I used to just do that. And I just love storytelling. I think the thing that got me into it was Jurassic Park, because that
Okay.
was I don't know if you remember this, but you would get the dual VHS thing that had like the movie on one VHS and then a making of on the other
Cool.
side.
Yeah.
And I watched that making of to death. And I just loved movie making and storytelling. And, but I came to a crossroads when I went off to university and I was deciding what I wanted to study. And I loved space. I loved space. And I loved the idea that I could go to college and just study the stars for four
Yeah.
years, I was really drawn to that. And then I enjoyed doing research. I went to the University of Colorado Boulder, sorry. And, sorry, Fort Collins. And I had a great opportunity to do research. And I really loved it and I was good at it. And so I carried on and did my PhD. I got to move to Scotland to go to graduate school. But then, as I started to finish my PhD, I didn't really think of like the what's next aspect of
Yeah.
my career. And I research was okay, but the tenuous career path, I think I didn't love it enough to go down that path. So anyway, long story medium, I started, as I got out of academia, I really loved teaching. And so I started giving talks at sci-fi conventions. I would go to Dragon Con and then some other local conventions like Fort Collins Comic Con. And I would give talks about the science of Star Trek or physics of Mass Effect or like these
hmm
random sort of niche things. And people loved them. There's a huge market like in that intersection of sci-fi fans and people who had a passion for science. And so that kind of led me down the path of starting to intersect with the entertainment industry. And going to these conventions also gave me an outlet to meet a lot of people in entertainment, to meet other writers, creators. I would go and talk to like the comic book creators and, the exhibition halls. and just say that, I'm a scientist. I love storytelling. And like, if, people who are writing sci-fi, if you ever want someone to, have a pass at your work, I'd love to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that just started to grow that side of the business. And so, yeah, these public talks, I think, has always been part of me from day one. I love public speaking. I used that to kind of get into the business. And then now I find myself most of the time behind the scenes. Like I said, I do writing, I do producing, and I love that as well. I really, really do. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to still go interact with the public, especially now as a consultant for Star Trek. It's kind of mutually beneficial because I can then go to official Star Trek events and be public facing as well as helping out behind the scenes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned in our pre-talk that you're going on a Star Trek cruise. Is that, are you going as so I have a couple questions about this, but are you going on the Star Trek cruise as a consultant or as someone who's involved with Star Trek?
Yeah, so kind of the latter. So okay. I'm going, as like a public figure science consultant. And so I'm doing a variety of things. I have some talks. So again, what's kind of cool is that now we've moved into the realm where I'm getting to talk about the physics of Star Trek, but the physics of Star Trek that I've helped make, you know? And so we'll talk about the science of Star Trek Discovery and get into all of that. So that's really exciting. And they put tons of events on, and I'm there as a public figure scientist, which is great.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's so cool that you're no longer talking about something that someone else has created, and now you're getting to talk about what you've kind of written or consulted on. That's so cool.
It's very exciting. Yeah.
My other question was, is it just a series of Star Trek, or is it the entire Star Trek universe? Because I mean, there are kind of different styles and all the different shows.
Oh yeah. We are over 55 years of Star Trek, and it is all represented. They get guests. Most of the guests are actors from across all the Star Trek series. Okay. And so they do a lot of panels. They do a lot of entertainment stuff. One of my best friends that I've met through Star Trek is Mary Chieffo. She played L'Rell in Star Trek Discovery. Mm-hmm. And for example, her and I are doing a cosmic mixology class where we're going to make cocktails for people. And so they really kind of throw everything at the wall because it's a 7-day cruise and it's all Star Trek, and they deck out the whole ship, and all the elevators make Star Trek noises, and you can go and sit in Quark's bar. It's delightful. As a Star Trek fan, I love it. Mm-hmm. So I'm really lucky to be able to do it.
Do they, this may be a silly question, are the Chris Pine movies part of the Star Trek canon?
Yeah. So the way, yes and no. When they were first made, they were through Paramount, which still had a Star Trek license. But CBS owns the Star Trek license for television. And kind of similar, if people have followed the Marvel, the MCU with Spider-Man, how Sony owns Spider-Man, but Disney owns the rest of MCU. It's a similar sort of deal. But with Star Trek, Viacom CBS is now the overlord of everything. And so they have, so everything is under one umbrella. But regardless, the Chris Pine films, we refer to as the Kelvin timeline, because really kicking it off the bat, that first 2009 film, the inciting incident is that they get kicked through a wormhole, and then you have a totally different timeline. Mm-hmm. So it still exists. We just never interact with it. And I do think some of those stars have gone to Star Trek conventions. I know Carl Urban has. He's a big Star Trek fan. So so it's still considered it. I have seen a lot of cosplay, and but those are big movie stars.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Carl Urban because we share a birthday.
Oh, nice! Good person to share a birthday
right.
with.
Him and
one day.
Him and Liam Neeson are my two birthday buddies.
Great. Mine's Eddie Izzard, so I'm
that. That's awesome too, though. Yeah. Very cool. So, so we talked about the cruise. What else is? So I'm curious. What is an average, maybe there's not an average day for you, but what's maybe an average week or month, or what is your life as a writer, producer, consultant look like?
Yeah, it's really fun. It's kind of freelance. It's starting to get a little bit more official, but
Hmm.
for Star Trek, as a science consultant, Star Trek had science consultants in the 90s,
Yeah.
and even like Gene Roddenberry would call his buddies, at Raytheon and whatever that's in LA and ask them questions. But they had formal roles in the late 80s and 90s with Next Generation and then through kind of the Berman era, excuse me, with Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And they were Narain Shakar and Andre Brahmanis. And their role, I've talked to them, I've been on panels with them, is really similar to what I do. So the role hasn't really changed over the years. Essentially, we get sent scripts and we read the scripts. That's kind of most of my day-to-day work is reviewing scripts, outlines, story ideas that are official network, like they've been gone through the writer's room and then they're sent to the network for review. That's where I get involved. But as I've worked on multiple shows, so I'm on 5 shows right now. So it's a lot of scripts and it's a lot of scripts. They're all at different stages of development. But as I go from season to season with different shows, that trust and that relationship starts to grow more. And so they'll call me in more for like sitting in the writer's room and bouncing
Okay.
ideas around and helping develop stories. But then also even helping with post-production. If they
Hmm.
want to do some big science-based thing, they want it to look right. And
Yeah.
so I'll meet with the post-production team and go through ideas and go through reference images and kind of bounce these clips back and forth to make sure it looks right, right enough that it's not going to pull people out.
Yeah.
So that's the consulting side. Writing, being a writer in Hollywood is a trick. Believe it or not, it's a tricky business. But a lot of that is very self-propelled. So it's about always having a script in the works. It's about refining old ones. It's about kind of building your network. And then right now I'm producing a short film. I started my own
Oh,
production
cool.
company this year. And one of my writer friends, had a great script that I really loved. And I had mentioned that I wanted to go into producing because it really reminded me of the stuff I did in engineering. Now, I wasn't motivated to do it in engineering, but this idea of like managing budgets, schedules, meetings, timelines, like I'm really good at that. And if I can apply that to storytelling and getting movies made, that's my sweet spot. And so I'm having an absolute ball doing that. And that's busy. I'm learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, people kind of warned me when I started going into to make a short film. They were like, just be aware, like it's as hard as making a feature film because you're still hiring all that crew. Like you still have to go through the whole process. It's just you have a smaller budget and a shorter shoot days. Like, but it's still a film. So I'm starting to feel that right now. It's a lot of meetings and coordinating, but I'm having an absolute ball. So I'm excited for as that moves forward. We're in pre-production right now. We film in April.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
So the what you were just talking about, are you like writing original stories or are you writing like educational content? What is it?
Yeah, I write a few things. So I wrote a nonfiction Audible original a couple years ago called The Science of Sci-Fi. And that was just a short, like I said, Audible original. It was like 4 hours about basically this, like science behind science fiction. And then I started writing some episodes for the YouTube channel Extra Credits. They would have me on to write science of video games. So that's in the nonfiction realm. But now I've really moved a little bit more into writing fiction and writing screenplays.
Mm.
I mentioned Andre Bermanis and Narain Shakar as the science consultants before. They became TV writers. And in fact, like Narain Shakar is the showrunner of The Expanse. he got his start as a science consultant for Star Trek. And so I've been very lucky to be mentored by them and to get advice. And honestly, once I started reading scripts, I've always loved stories, like I said, and I always loved film and television, but I could never write a novel. Like I would sit down to try to come up with a story and write a novel, and I just never had that process down. But once I started reading scripts, and I'm reading hundreds of pages of scripts a week, I really felt like that was a medium that I was comfortable speaking through and telling stories through. And so I started learning how to do it. And part of the process in the industry is that you write a lot of your own scripts. And whether that is to sell them or to use them as samples to get hired to write on other shows. For me, I really go for the latter. I love working in a writer's room and helping other people's stories get told.
Yeah.
Writing it's freaking fan fiction. I love fan fiction. And so to help create characters and help to write storylines, like I love doing that and I'm good at it. And it's so nice to have this really roundabout path and then finally find something that you love and you're good at.
Yeah.
Very lucky.
Oh, that's so great. And so what are some of your, I mean, you talk about a lot, you work on Star Trek a lot. You talk about a lot of different things. I've heard you talk about Mass Effect. I did listen to the Science of Sci-Fi and I really liked it.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
What are some of your, so the biggest thing that kind of blew my mind that I still tell people about is that like the satellites around the Earth are like in a different time from us. And that showed up in something else the other day. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I just learned about that.
Yay. Yeah, it's a great fact. We have these like some of these facts that we love to tell people. But yeah, if anyone saw Interstellar, where they had time was different on the surface of the planet that was orbiting the black hole than the people on the ship. Mm-hmm. For them, it was extreme. It was like half an hour on the planet was like 7 years up on the spaceship. Yeah, you're not crawling out of that gravity well. Just to make that perfectly clear. Like you can go down, but you're not coming back out of that.
Yeah.
But it's a good story. It's the same thing happens. It's called gravitational time dilation. And it's just this idea that we live on the surface of the planet is inside a gravity well. It's that bowling ball and a trampoline. Mm-hmm. And GPS satellites are further outside that gravity well. And so they don't experience that, what we call gravitational time dilation, where time gets stretched and we experience time slower than those satellites do. It's infinitesimally small, like it's fractions of nanoseconds, but it's enough for GPS satellites. We want those to be really accurate. So they do take that into account when it comes to calculating GPS. Yeah. It's a great fact.
That's so cool. Is Mile High in Colorado enough of a difference?
It is not. I have tried to crunch the numbers on that. And yeah, unfortunately, it's not. I mean, you could stretch that, but yeah, not to any significant degree. Sorry.
Yeah. So what are some of your other like favorite movies, TV shows, or even video games? I know you're pretty involved in games as well.
Yeah. Well, we've mentioned Mass Effect a couple times. Single player role-playing games are my favorite. Yes. Oh my God. We have to be careful to not go down that road.
I know. I could talk about Mass Effect all day.
Oh my God, me too. But this is why I love it. Like, this is why I love that, is that exact interaction. Because yeah, when you and I meet in person, we're going to talk about Mass Effect and it's going to be a long conversation because it's unique stories. And I just absolutely love that. You know, I also really like turn-based strategy games. Things like XCOM are some of my favorite games. And they're coming out with a new Marvel, that studio is coming out with a Marvel video game that's similar. I'm really looking forward to that.
Oh, like that's a turn-based?
Yeah.
Oh,
and
very cool.
I know, I'm real excited. I forget the name of it, but I think it comes out in like May. And it's the same studio that does XCOM. And it's sort of a little bit more of a solo RPG mixed with that combat style. So the way they pitched it was like you play a character and you're like hanging around the Avengers headquarters and then you go out on missions.
That's cool.
Yes, please sign me up. And speaking of, I just picked up the Marvel's Avengers video game, which again, I am not a multi online player person. I don't like other people in my video games. It scares me. I'm afraid of strangers. I don't like interacting with people. I don't like my video game playing to, bring anyone else down. But what I realized is that game has a huge single player RPG storyline. I think I'm like 15 hours into it and I'm only a few % of the way through the single player mission. So I'm really loving that. The main character you play is Kamala Khan, and she's, Ms. Marvel. And she's she's just a fangirl in the best way. So I like playing that character. She's a lot of fun. She's really excited to get the Avengers together. And I'm like, yeah, let's go get Tony Stark.
Yeah, I've seen the Avengers games. Like I've seen them on sale on Steam, and I've wondered if I should get them. Like, are they fun or are they not so great? But that's good to hear.
I gotta say, I really enjoy this. So this was a good lesson in me for to remember that there's so many different types of video game players out there that to really take reviews with a grain of salt, because I'm enjoying it a lot. And then I mean, we've talked about MCU a lot, but I really, during the pandemic, I kind of got really into that. That's been very nice. It's like a nice little comfort blanket of films to watch and TV shows. And I love Loki and the whole time variant authority. I'm actually wearing a Loki shirt right now. The whole time variant authority really spoke to me. I was like, that's it. That's my job. I manage timelines in Star Trek. The few people who work for the time variant authority. But yeah, it's I genuinely just love television. There's some other great shows out right now. Abbott Elementary is fantastic. It's airing on ABC, but I've been watching it on Hulu. Comes out weekly, and it's the same. I think it's one of the executive producers who did like The Office and Parks and Rec, and it's a very it's that style.
Okay. And
it's about a underprivileged school in Philadelphia, and it's hilarious and wonderful. And so there's so much good stuff out.
There's so much good stuff. Yeah. There's not enough time to watch everything or play
really
everything.
I have a spreadsheet. I finally had to make a spreadsheet
of your future, of the things you're going to watch.
Yeah. As things come out, I just write them down so I can, because I want to stay on top of stuff. And I have, one of the things is, I do deal with anxiety. And one of the things I manage anxiety is watch stuff that I've watched plenty of times before. And I have had to remind myself to not watch the Great British Baking Show for the 1,000th time. And maybe chip away at some of those shows that are building up a backlog. But, it's still there if I need it.
Yep. So we also love the Great British Baking Show. And my old dentist, all the dentists had like a screen in front of the chair, and they had like Netflix, or they could put on whatever they wanted on the screen. And my dentist always had Great British Bake Off going. And so I would try to talk to her about it, but she never watched it. She just put it on because she knew that people liked it, and like people felt really calm when they were watching it.
It's true. It'll do it. Yeah. It calms you down, man. And I got really into baking. I got really into baking from that. Yeah. That was another sort of fun pandemic discovery. Was like, I liked food, but I'd never really given myself the time to learn it. And I think one of the great things about baking is it is kind of like a science experiment. You really do have to measure stuff right. And it can go wrong. But if it goes right, then it's tasty.
and if it goes wrong, you can try to figure out what went wrong and fix it next time.
Exactly. And sometimes it's still tasty.
Yeah.
So it works out. Yeah.
If you've been able to hear some groaning, both Erin and our audience, it's because my dog is very jealous that I'm not paying enough attention to her right now. Yeah.
Zoom pets are always allowed.
Right. Well, I brought her bed over here. I was hoping that she would just chill out. But when I ran my old podcast, I would always have to go in the closet so I could keep her away from me, because she would just sit at the desk and groan the whole time.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's funny.
But I didn't do that today. So you're doing a lot of cool stuff in Fort Collins when you're going to be here. You're kind of narrating or emceeing or hosting our Get Lost in Space concert, which is going to be so great. But you're also giving a talk before the concert, the influence of sci-fi on pop culture, and then giving a couple presentations at schools. And you're doing we're showing a movie at the Lyric Theater. It's to be announced which movie. Depends on which ones we can get. Hi there. When we recorded this interview, we didn't have all of Erin's events totally lined up, but we do now. You can find all those at our website, fcsymphony.org, or in the show notes or description of this episode.
Thank you. I'm really excited. I don't know if we mentioned this, or people probably know this, but I'm Fort Collins born and raised, so it's going to be great to be back. I literally all grew up through Fort Collins, graduate of Poudre High School. So I'm really excited to talk to students and share my career path. I think I learned a lot very quickly after leaving school and going into college. And I'm excited because I think I and a lot of students put so much pressure on ourselves to do really well. And to try to like, dog has entered the chat.
I'm so sorry.
But yeah, we put a lot of pressure on like the decisions we're going to make. Like, what are you going to study? What's your career going to be? And I think I'm a great example of like, you can change your mind multiple times. And I want to really impart that to.
I feel like we've got to have it all figured out when we go to college.
Yeah. And I really felt that pressure. And then when things weren't working out and I wanted to change my mind, that was really hard. But then it became easier as I discovered that that was the right way to go. And then I'm also really excited to go to the Lyric and give a talk. I think the plan is, like you said, we haven't pinned down the movie yet, but it'll be some sort of sci-fi. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of science in films, and I'll obviously hang out and watch the movie. And so I'm excited to do that. And then, we're working on some other stuff. And then the symphony itself, I'm thrilled about. I love musical scores and composers, and just how you can tell stories and share those themes through music. And so we've got a great set list for, various sci-fi classics that we're going to get to hear that I'm just so excited. And we're going to talk a little bit before about how science fiction has affected our world and affected popular culture. I feel like sci-fi is one of those sort of niche things. Like my parents were never into science fiction, and there's a lot of people who just aren't into it and they don't see the appeal of it, but they don't necessarily realize how much of an impact science fiction has had on our world. I think primarily in science, and how many people have gone into science because of television and have invented things because of they saw it, or they saw the idea on a movie. And I love that concept. So it's going to be really fun. I'm really excited to be in Fort Collins that week. So people can stay tuned. My Twitter is probably the best place, at Dr. Erin Mac, DRERINMAC. I'll post if there's any new events or when we announce the movie and that sort of thing. Otherwise you'll just find me wandering around downtown Fort Collins.
What are your favorite spots downtown?
I was born and raised in Fort Collins, but really I was born and raised in the Bean Cycle. We know that family very well. And they were like, even before they had moved location. So that's one of my favorite places to go and say hi to them. And so much has just changed. I mean, especially in the last few years, I say even before the pandemic, but then I haven't had a chance to really be there since before 2020. So I'm excited to be back and wander around. I love good college places. Avogadro's number. I love college towns.
Yeah.
This is a great one. Go to the Rainbow, eat some vegan breakfast. It's awesome. I love it.
Fort Collins is a good town. There's so much to do. My mom's coming out for the concert. Cool. And it's just like, what's everything we can do? We can't do everything. Yeah. But totally. What are the things that we definitely need to do?
It's always so hard because you've got, because you also then have the mountains like looming right there where you're like, that's the Rocky Mountains. I feel like I should be in the Rocky Mountains if I'm this close to them, but there's so much to do in town. So I usually try to break that up. I'm like, okay, I'll do a mountain visit and then I'll do a town visit.
Oh yeah.
It's gonna be great.
Well, Erin, we're so excited to have you here. Again, the concert is March 25th, and we'll be sending out information on all of those. It'll be all over our website, and you'll be sharing on Twitter. Is there anything you want to send us off with? Any final comments for our listeners?
No, I'm just excited to be there. I'm excited to geek out about science fiction. So come say hi, and we can always talk about Mass Effect. And I shared my Twitter. Again, it's at Dr. Erin Mac, DRERINMAC. And I guess the last thing to leave with is live long and prosper.
Perfect.